Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Know the Rules of the Game podcast. I'm Desiree Patno, your host. I am the CEO and president of Women in Housing Real Estate Ecosystem. And today I am super excited because we're going to bring to you someone that when I met her 5-6 years ago at a conference for women impacting public policy, I was blown away because the fact is that over these years that I have seen a whole new side of this lady. And I am so honored to have her be not only a personal friend, but also my business partner. And welcome, Courtney.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. Welcome. Oh my gosh, this is nerve-wracking because I'm interviewing you. But anyway, she is one incredible lady that if you only knew to the depth of every time I talk to her, everything that she brings to the table from the female veterans is just unbelievable. And so that is, again, the show today. Know the Rules of the Game for female veterans is what this podcast is really going to take a deep dive into. Because it's something I learned from her, very important. You got to speak the military talk. You got to understand where it's coming from and what it's like. And so a little bit of background on myself. I am the founder, as I said, of Women Housing Real Estate Ecosystem. In addition to that, I am the advisor investor for Amicus Brain, AI for Aging Population, and also I'm the Chief Strategic Officer for Zulu Time, which hence we have Courtney, the founder of Zulu Time, for the Holistic Transitional Center for Veterans. And then also I am a national speaker and connector for the network and wealth of knowledge across a vast economic footprint. And so in this space, I've been working very diligently to make sure that we have a voice, and hence we trademarked Know the Rules of the Game last year to really command the voice of those who don't have a voice, but also we can understand the rules of how to only known we could play a better economic footprint. So welcome again, Erica, and we're going to talk a little bit about yourself. You are the president of Zulu Time, founder of 2020 Vet, and you're a U.S. Army veteran at Aviation, and you're a major and a NATO gender advisor. But also I'd like to add in, she is the very first female helicopter combat pilot. Yes. Sorry.
No, I'm going to correct you there. I am not.
You're not?
Part of the first group. No, I am part of the first group of women to fly the cavalry mission. So we were essentially blazing trails in the last of all airframes in any service to allow women.
All right. So how many were in your group?
There was 5 of us.
Okay. So I stand corrected, everyone on the call. One of the first 5. Okay. Technicalities. All right, thank you. So she is, if you haven't noticed already, detailed, micro detailed. I love her for that. As a U.S. Army veteran, having served in various positions to include military police, scout helicopter pilot, and paratrooper. As a trailblazer, she was part of the first group of women to go cavalry, hence, and the first to graduate from the Advanced Armor Cavalry Course. What is that?
So that is a course that prepares you to take command of a cavalry unit. It goes in depth with cavalry tactics from different functions such as armor, artillery, aviation, and sort of ties them all together. And at the time, this was an armor school and it was not open to women, but I kept hitting up my leadership every 6 months that, I really wanted to become more professionally developed. And if I was going to take command, I really wanted this course. So persistence paid off, and I had the chance to go through and take the course and came out, more knowledgeable and a better leader. So I was excited to have the chance to, basically have the same opportunities that my male counterparts had.
So if I were to ask an honest question, how many times do you have to ask? And how long does that take to ask? Like 5 times?
Yeah, probably about 6 times. So, just persistence, do your job well. And sometimes, you get rewarded for that. And my brigade commander said, okay, I'm going to make some phone calls and got me in. And this was around 2001. And remember, the law to allow women in combat arms did not officially change till 2013. So it was, kind of a big deal.
Kind of 12 years. Yes. Okay. Here we go. All right. We haven't gone through one line. Her staff work includes flight operations, senior logistical, contracting, and budget management positions in charge of $750 million in equipment, $200 million in budgets, and 2,500 people in the most deployable units in peacetime and in war. Upon leaving the active duty after 14 years of service, she worked as a corporate executive and then founded a company focused on government business, developing and growing on an average of 45% year over year for the first 5 years. Erica then sold the company in 2014 and founded 2020 Vet, which is what she now runs. That's unbelievable numbers in any capacity at any time. 45% year over year over 5 years. That's phenomenal, Erica. In addition to, you're quite welcome. I mean, you're the one that's doing this. Crazy. She has continued through the nation as a major in the U.S. Army Reserve under the Joint Chief and staff working on women, peace, and security initiatives as the only NATO, let me repeat that, the only NATO certified gender advisor working at the political and strategic levels. She was commissioned representing more than 650,000 women in Florida, is on the board of directors for Women Impacting Public Policy, hence we met, and former board member of an independent K-8 school in Half Moon Bay. I've been there, beautiful place you live, and the past president for the U.S. Veterans Business Alliance, the longest running national veterans organization focused on veterans and entrepreneurship. She is also the co-founder of Zulu Time, which is a veteran transition center focused on community integration, ultimately providing the veteran a livelihood and sense of purpose. That's so important. Erica has received numerous awards, included being named as Woman with a Leadership Background and Ability to Change World by Oprah, and the White House Project. What year was that with Oprah? Do you remember?
Oh, such questions. Well, it must have been around, I'd say 2008. It was somewhere right around when I was getting my master's degree.
How cool is that? That was awesome. And the 40 and 40 doing good things in business and the community by the Jacksonville, Florida Business Journal. A 2015 Women of Influence by the Silicon Valley Business Journal. The 2016 National SROTC Cadet Instructor of the Year. And 2016 nominated Changemaker by the White House Summit on the United States of Women. That's interesting. What is that? Summit on the United States of Women. Okay.
Sure. It's a national organization that really focuses on empowering women at all levels and sort of tackling the underrepresentation that exists in everything from judicial to business to law enforcement, you name it. So they have segments that are regional. They go around the country and they inspire and motivate and teach the next generation to basically participate in the process of making sure that there's more women at the table.
I love it. See, I learned something just in the last 2 minutes. And the 2017 Small Business Innovation Award by AT&T. She also has a BS in Communications from the University of Hawaii. Sad place, sorry. An executive MBA from Florida International University, and EMBA program in internships in India and China. Okay, so welcome, Erica. But before we even begin, how many countries have you been to?
I don't know, Desiree, and the attention to detail. I'm happy to report that there's 2 more NATO WPS gender certified personnel at the strategic and the policy level in the Pentagon. So, our numbers are growing, and that's the intent, to continue to get more gender advisors throughout the force, which implements a gender perspective, throughout all the training and operations and policy. So, I'm not the only one anymore, which is fantastic. You've
been doing this is absolutely fantastic. But on top of that, I mean, you have traveled to so many different countries. And so to know that from the intimate level that is unbelievable. So I'm so happy that you got additional help. But at the same time, the whole focus is I wanted to put in is how many countries you've been to, because to know what you're doing on a global scale, to understand the dynamics of where you've been is so powerful. So before we get in, again, welcome. And I'm so honored to have you on the call and the depth that you've prepared. For everyone listening, of all the podcasts I've ever done for Know the Rules of the Game, this is the most intense literature that I have been given to go through it. So I am so honored to have that. But before we get into it, asking the questions, give us some of your highlights of some of the first that you've done while you've been in the service.
Well, I think you hit on some of them, and I do want to start by saying veterans are very uncomfortable talking about themselves, and even listening to our bios, it's like, oh my gosh, to start off with that. But over time, I recognize that we do need to tell our stories, and people do need to know what value that we bring to society. So, in the spirit of that, I've never done things, just to be the first to do something. It was because I was passionate about it or something looked interesting to me, and it just happened to be that there, wasn't anybody before me. Having gotten a little bit older and wiser, I mean, clearly I'm standing on giants of many women before me, and that has paved the way to allow me to have these opportunities. And now, I am giving back to the next generation, and they're standing on our shoulders. So the sad thing is we're in 2020, and I still see articles all the time about first in the military, first in corporate environment, you name it. We should be further along, but, we've got room to go. So I will start just very quickly. You hit on some things, but I grew up with a very adventurous family, and I was the youngest female to climb Mount Whitney. I was 9 years old, and that was the tallest mountain in the continental U.S. So I always believed that, I could conquer pretty much anything, and nothing was off limits. I went in as basically went to college after high school, bored out of my mind, and decided to join the Army's military police. And it was fantastic. I didn't feel any kind of gender bias. We were actually very, I think, valued, because there was a lot of women that had to search women, and women pick up on nonverbal cues. Then after about 3.5 years of being in Europe, then I decided, okay, I'm going to get a scholarship and then go to become an officer. And that's when I was at University of Hawaii, and this was back in 2006, 2007. I was the first female cadet commander of the school for basically the entire year. And again, didn't know that. It just was what it was. Then when I came in as an aviator, I was going to fly the Apache, and decided, wow, this cavalry mission's opening. That's the coolest mission ever. And so I looked into it, and they had just opened it up. So again, I was the first group of women to be allowed to go to training and fly the basic combat skills to learn how to be a cavalry pilot, which was fantastic. Unofficially, I've got so many stories, but unofficially, my first unit, cavalry, it was a heavy division cavalry with a bunch of tanks and a bunch of aircraft on the DMZ in South Korea, which was a great first assignment, because if you fly wrong, you're actually going to get shot out of the sky by the North Koreans. So you had to kind of grow up pretty quick and lead well. So anyway,
this is not a game. This is not an electronic game. Okay, no, got it.
not a game. So then earning your spurs is a rite of passage, and that's a good 3 days of cavalry knowledge and sitting in front of your leadership and answering a bunch of questions, and then going through a couple days of all kinds of implementing certain cavalry skills day and night, and carrying a bunch of stuff. And none of the armor guys, of course, wanted me in their group, and turns out by the end of it, I was carrying their load. So the whole gender thing of, oh my gosh, she's only 125 pounds, went out the window pretty quick. So at the end, when I had earned my spurs, we had to go to an event, a ceremony, and at the time we only had skirts to wear in our formal Army dress uniform. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to wear a skirt with my spurs to, this party. This is ridiculous. So I went to a local Korean tailor, had some pants made, wore them, and my leadership just kind of looked at me and was like, all right, looking good, Lieutenant. So, I think I was probably one of the first to unofficially wear pants with spurs, which is, it's silly in retrospect, but again, I was not going to wear it with a skirt. And again,
it's not silly. It was a statement. It's strong. It's powerful. It gives you the right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. I earned it. All right. So anyway, great time. And then when I was a young captain, I got the chance to go to the Advanced Cavalry Armor School. And then, later on, after I had done 11 years active duty, there was first in terms of like sitting as board presidents and participating in certain advocacy roles. And, as you know, I'm a California commissioner for California Commission on Women and Girls. I was a commissioner in Florida. So, I've really enjoyed my journey, and wouldn't have had it any other way.
Do you notice how she talks as fast or faster than I do? Did you get that? And how fast she enunciates and gets it together and her passion and her heart? Just everyone on the call. Okay, we got to get this going. Yeah, no, it's an all day work, Erica. It's just, easy peasy. I mean, what's the problem here? Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's take a step back. Bottom line up front, BLUF. U.S. service personnel and military veterans continue to take their own lives at unprecedented rates. And so that was incredible, Erica. I'm still processing. If all of you are still processing, I'm still processing for the umpteenth time I've heard it, but this is incredible. This is, oh my gosh. It is an epidemic. Despite the fact that there are over 45,000 nonprofits dedicated to veterans and their families, in addition to multiple billion-dollar-backed government programs aimed at addressing servicemen and veteran issues, we have made little to no progress in combating this over the last decade. In fact, there was an article that just came out, I think, that you just posted, Erica, where it was something like $800 some million that had not gone to the proper funding and where it was supposed to go as inappropriate funding for not going to the veterans that were service disabled. We do not offer them insightful options as they leave the service besides corporate job placement. And when they leave the service and transition, they were overwhelmed at help options. We have 3 years to catch them. And if we do not provide meaningful direction, this is the point we lose them. During transition, they don't know where to begin or even what they need at that point. They feel alone. They withdraw. They don't speak the language. That is until they find meaningful local resources, equipping them with necessary tools, peer-to-peer mentoring, and a network that aims to provide them purpose. Since over half the veterans leaving the service do not return to the place they are from, think about that. Do not return to the place they are from, 50%. Local attainable resources are critical. Recent studies also show that more than 50% of post-9/11 veterans report not knowing where to go for help, despite the thousands of organizations in existence, over 45,000 we just heard. It is just too much. Tough love, coaching, and sense of belonging is what they are used to, and it takes other veterans to guide them through this process. Veterans test other veterans as is part of their ethos, not to leave a fallen comrade behind. This approach will fast-track them towards successful integration and save the lives of thousands of national treasures that can be valuable members of society. It is our duty to change the sovereign statistics. According to the 2018 Blue Star Families Military Family Lifestyle Survey, 82% of military veteran families feel that the general public doesn't understand the sacrifices they made. In addition, our women veterans face additional challenges that have made their male counterparts do not. Meet our guest, Armor veteran Erica Courtney. And that's where my core is that, Erica, you are in a different worldly, in my opinion, place that you have been there, done it in the trenches, been on top, seen the light, protect the military from the warlords, and then from there come back and see what you've experienced. You're coming back to bring into forward of how that impact is going to change on the numbers of the statistics that you can bring them to make sure that they have a voice and they have a purpose to get from falling into getting to where it's very hard to get them to retrieve them back. Right? Sure. So with that being said, we have veterans we lose 22 veterans a day, account for 22% of all suicides completed in the United States. We lose a veteran every 65 minutes due to suicide, and we lose 6,000 veterans a year to suicide. If you think about those numbers, 22, 65, 6,000, we cannot put a number on it. We have to put a person and a face to each one of those people. And they have served and have given everything so we all can be here. If you think of the times we're going through right now. So let's go through and talk about the very first question that we want to bring to the table about what is an invisible veteran.
Sure. An invisible veteran is a woman who served in the military. And there's a very poignant poem. It was written by Sarge Littecum. And if you just bear with me, just to kind of start where we're going with this, she writes, "You can tell her by the twinkle in her eye At parades when the flag marches by, she served our country and she served it very well. Some have even served a tour or two in hell. She suffered hardship and never ceased to care. It gave us strength just to know that she was there. She was a leader. You could tell by the rank she wore, but she became the invisible veteran after the war. She can march, she can fly, and she can sail. She proved that bravery isn't exclusive of the male. She did every job she was asked and more, but she became the invisible veteran after the war. Now it's finally time to right a wrong, honor our sister veteran, hear her song. It's very clear that she's a patriot to the core. Don't let her be the invisible veteran anymore.
It's very heavy. If you think about how many times someone walked up to someone, husband and wife, and say, thank you for your service, or acknowledge thinking the guy and the girl's the one who's been in the service, and the portrayal of what they, wear or the clothes that you buy. I've heard you talk many, many times about this, just being around you, and you're bringing things to the table when you see things. You're the female, you're the veteran. How can you paraphrase it in your own words that this is something that you've experienced, or you both you and your husband are both have served in the military. You both were helicopter pilots, both gone to several same countries. How does that have different now that you've both been out for a while?
Well, I mean, I definitely want to talk about, sort of these unconscious biases, but, to summarize a little bit of my own experience, when I had got out, I mean, it got easier for me as I gained rank and my reputation preceded me, and, it wasn't as bad. It's always harder for the first. And then once people realize that you can do the job and you can do it well, it's really not a big deal, and it's not even talked about much. So when I got out, I was feeling good. I had 11 years active duty. I had 2 babies, and I was like, wow, all of a sudden I'm not invincible anymore, and decided to leave. And it was a tough decision, but I just wanted to make sure that I was there for my kids. And at the time, the maternity, policies were not nearly what they are today. I mean, I had literally like 1 week, I had my baby, and I was back pushing people out to Iraq and bringing them home from Afghanistan. And, there just was there's no time. So, it wasn't conducive to motherhood. So,
my mouth is dropping. Sorry.
Well, and again, we've come a long way, but, there's still room to kind of grow. But I realized really quickly when I had got out, I was intermingling with a lot of the guys that, I had served with, or even some of the helicopter pilots that my husband, he switched to the Coast Guard, that served with. And, I was basically one of the guys. I knew how to speak, military, and, we just kind of, the jokes that we kind of throw at each other, and, the outside world looks and goes, oh my gosh, that would be like a terrible thing to say. And, it's just the banter that kind of keeps us going. And I noticed from the side, there was a lot of spouses just giving me the evil eye. And it was my first taste of, wow, I'm not a service person anymore. I am a spouse. I am like whatever is considered, a normal female. Therefore, my brashness and humor and kind of banter back and forth with the guys was seen as threatening, or they just didn't understand it. So I kind of had to take a step back and reflect and say, what is this new reality I'm living in? And, I started working in a corporate environment, and, like many veterans, I was like, oh my gosh, why are they whining that the coffee's not too hot? Or, just things that like we just don't do in the service. You just go, right? And if you whine, it's kind of jokingly, because nobody wants that around. And so I wasn't a great fit for corporate America. I worked hard, and, I was very mission driven, but, lacked that sort of community and integrity, and everybody was sort of working for the almighty dollar and not sharing information. And, you just don't do that. Like, you cannot wonder what the guy to your left and right is doing. You got to know that they're doing their job, and, you know, you're all working as a team, and, you know, there's not greed involved. So, you know, I then started looking, you know, for jobs, and I recognized very early that if there was a man interviewing and I was interviewing and we're both veterans, 9 times out of 10, he would be seen as the warrior, and I would not, even though I was more in a combat arms role, you know, than him. And so I started looking into statistics, and it took me many years to kind of figure out that, you know, why do women, you know, we'll get into this, suffer from higher rates of depression and, you know, PTSD and suicides over our male veteran counterparts? Like, what is that? And I had to reflect and say, well, I think that women have to learn how to be feminine in a society that expects you to be a certain way. And when you come out, you know, you've led men, you've been in charge of hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment, and, you know, the amount of responsibility you have at such a young age is something you don't see on the outside. So you come out and you're direct, and you're very mission focused, and you have integrity, and you're all about teamwork, and women don't know how to deal with it. Honestly, women were some of the hardest critics, and men are also don't understand that style. So it takes a while for veterans, you know, especially female veterans, to figure out how to be warmer, I guess, and how to be more patient and not so direct. So you can get what you need accomplished in a way that doesn't, you know, threaten people. You just don't have time for that in the military. So, you know, again, that extra element of trying to fit into a society that, you know, you had to sort of change and become one way in the military, where you were, you know, you couldn't give off signals. You had to be very direct. You had to, you know, be a certain kind of way and be tough, and never let them see you sweat, never let them see you cry. You better bite your tongue until it almost bleeds before you let that happen. You almost had to be tougher. And so when you come out, people don't know how to deal with that.
You use the word soft. You had to soften yourself. And many times we've spoken about the impact. And I really believe that in corporate America, you know, you have the going gets tough, you know, old saying. And I can see where in corporate America that they would feel, as you say, the almighty dollar threatened, because you're trying to be a team, but that was survival in the military. Where you come out in corporate America, the survival is of money versus the survival of team. And even though you've been on a contract in a different platform, but here you're talking about the softening skills of the women, of being not to be, you know, that, you know, the inner core of that burning. And I could just imagine not only that transition for you, but the transition to go into a corporate board and expect to not to be seen or heard. And you're just sitting there and saying, no, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to utilize the seat. I have the platform, I have the voice, I have the stage, I have the speaker, I have the mic, right? And the intensity that would go with it is, and it's something that you've been out now for a few years. Has it changed? Has it softened for you to soften? Or is it something that you still have to keep reminding as being in it for 11 years? And still going back to as a reservist, to go back in the whole of the Pentagon.
Yeah. So I had 11 years, you know, plus like 3 years as a cadet. So, I mean, my whole adulthood was military. And, you know, again, it took me many years to kind of figure out what some of the things that I had to kind of overcome. I had to bridge that military cultural divide. I had to understand where they're coming from. And I, as a veteran, have the onus, and I tell this to veterans all the time, is we have to learn the language of corporate or entrepreneurship or whatever it may be as well. Because, you know, what happens is veterans are sort of portraying, they're working towards something in a certain way, and they don't understand why non-veterans are perceiving them as, you know, one way. And so you get this animosity and this misunderstanding, but it sure helps when someone on the other side of, you know, a corporation or whatever it may be, sort of understands their skill set and their capabilities and how they approach things. And then that veteran also understands how to say, hey, this is what I did, and this is how it translates to what I can do in a language that they really can understand. So it's this really interesting communication barrier. And I am this very unique person because I completely got out and went through my transition process and, started a couple businesses and, went down my journey. And then in 2013, after a 7-year break in service, if you would have told me I would have put a uniform on again, I would have thought you were crazy. But they had just lifted the law for women to serve in all combat operations roles. And having been there, done that, unofficially, like many women before me, I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to kind of talk straight to the next generation of leaders coming up. So I joined the reserves and I started teaching at UC Santa Clara and Stanford and San Jose. And, I approached it in a way that was more like, let's talk about what women, how their brains work and how men's brains work. And it's not all about the physical and, let's respect each other as individuals and how much more powerful can we be with this, understanding and diversity that we bring to, the organization as a whole. So I really enjoyed it. And, if I'm at the point in my life that if I'm enjoying something and I can give back, then great, sign me up. And then next thing I know, I was sucked up to some battalion staff and brought in instructors basically everywhere west of the Mississippi. And then I got the opportunity. My old boss said, you should go to the Joint Staff at the Pentagon and, take some of the business skills and, advocacy skills that you have had and, try to make a difference up there. And, for a good year, I was trying to get on, and I ended up getting a position at Global Policy and Partnerships. And then it sort of worked into going to Sweden and becoming a certified, what we call gender advisor. And my role at the time was to advise different joint staff and combat commands and work with other gender advisors in these areas on how to implement a gender perspective in all of our training, policy, planning. And that doesn't mean, like we need women for the sake of women. It's like, no, we need to look at these populations differently and how our traditional fighting forces are utilizing human capital through the use of child soldiers and rape and ethnic cleansing to fuel and fund the violent extremist organizations. So I had a hand in helping, the group of professionals and writing policy for the Department of Defense. And now I'm sort of kind of working within the peacekeeping and some other areas. So, I feel honored to be able to be in a position to provide insight to my military counterparts now too, because I bring that civilian take. So I'm this interesting bridge that can speak both languages. And when I see the military trying to tackle how we deal with transitioning veterans, I'll be the first to call it out and say, we're failing our veterans. You're teaching them how to dress, you're teaching them how to write a resume, and they have no idea what this language is. And we got to teach them how to tell their story. We got to teach them to be confident. We got to tell them this is what the road is going to look like for the next 3 years. But when you come out of it, how successful can you be as a citizen? So
you have hit on so many points. The thing that I take away from this, obviously from the Women's Peace Security Act, but the other piece is that it's almost as if you have dual languages being spoken here. You have the veteran language of understanding of the truism of what the transitional impact is, being in combat, being in so many different countries, the different cultures that you experience, and how the camaraderie of saving lives and being the rescue and the team, meaning life existence. And then the other aspect is the female portion of it, of how to address being the tough and the hard and having the fight and don't let them see you sweat, to coming out and being soft. But as you hear all the D&I pieces, that how, well, you have to transition this so the men can understand what the women's thinking, and vice versa, is that you got to teach the women to understand what the men are thinking. You're doing the same thing from the veteran's point of view, and then from the female veteran's point of view. So you're doing a double whammy of, if you think about it from a completely different cultural, as if a different language and a different impact, right? And a high intensity. So hence, been there, done that, as you keep saying. It's powerful. So you can tell I just go on. So if we play that into our second question, we've touched a fair amount on it, but if you were to coin it up, why do you think that female veterans are invisible, and what issues are unique to female veterans that you believe that is going to, you talk about some statistics here. Talk a little bit about that, about the Women's Action Network survey and how that plays into the identification. We talked a little bit, but let's finish that off before we go into our third question.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it's images that we see and what we grow up with in our society. When you look at a soldier in a way that Hollywood portrays a soldier, it's the big muscle guy who's kicking down the doors and rolling in the dirt. And, you know, these are the big burly guys. You know, and we need those guys, you know, absolutely. We need those guys carrying 200 pounds on their back that, you know, are smart guys and can interact with communities. But, you know, in the Army and the Marines especially, it is really about the physical. It's always been about the physical. So I always had to prove myself physically. I was a great runner, which really helped me out. And I was very strong mentally. So you throw something on my back and I wouldn't complain. If you can impress them physically in these, you know, ground types of units, then they'll give you a chance to move on. But today, you know, the military is changing. And in order to remain competitive as a force, and this is where my reserve piece kind of comes in, I mean, we've got all this uncertainty going around the world. We call it a great global power competition. And we need thinkers right now. We need strategists, we need intelligence, and we need communicators. We need collaborators with partner nations and technology experts. And a lot of these roles are extremely well suited for women, you know, because having a diverse force makes us a better force. Having a diverse workplace makes us a better workplace. You know, this isn't rocket scientists. And I go back to the cultural divide is very real. You know, understanding languages and what being feminine means and overcoming and understanding what traditional expectations are and how to navigate that. Because you don't figure that out, it's going to lead to some type of conflict. And, you know, there was a 2015 study on how female veterans cope with transition. And one of the participants basically said, hey, when I first got out of the military, I had a hard time with women, with civilian women, and they didn't understand why I looked so militant. You know, why do you walk straight up and why do you walk so directly? And, you know, operating in that male dominating environment, you know, doing traditionally male activities to include combat are so different than what a lot of civilian women have had to encounter. Not that female veterans are better in any way, it's just experience and, you know, pushing through things and knowing that each time you think you can't do something, and this goes for male veterans as well, and you do it, and then the next time you think you can't do something and you do it, before you know it, I mean, you've got confidence. I mean, I honestly feel like there's not much I can't do. It's because I have been pushed and I have been tested. And, you know, that makes us a little bit different. You know, it's not that they're cocky. It's just you kind of believe in your abilities. So what I will say is that, you know, women are often denied recognition for their military accomplishments. There's been surveys out there that suggest that 74% of the respondents said that the general public doesn't recognize their service. I've got friends all the time that will park in hey, this parking space is for a veteran, and they get yelled at. Or, you know, if you look out there in terms of what's available for female veterans, it's very male related. You know, it's like, I'm a male, I'm a veteran. And, you know, when you see things made for females, it generally relates to your spouse or your military brat, but not associating with you in the service. And we kind of need to pay attention to this, because we have a ton of women who are not self-identifying as a veteran. And that's a problem. And that is why I tell my story, and I work with other women veterans to tell their story, because they need to understand that they wore a uniform and they are a veteran and they served proudly, and they should be breaking those stereotypes that we don't all need to be, you know, 200-pound muscle guys to look like a veteran. So, you know, I would say that, you know, the biases that women face, it does really lead to higher rates of mental and physical health issues over our male counterparts.
I hear a clothing line in one aspect that's coming out soon. I hear storytelling on fabric. And the second thing I hear is that impact for the transitional center is really going to focus on dealing with the issues of twofold. One, the male transition, and the female transition will be very different based on that. Three, so thank you very much for that. I mean, just, you can hear the ebbs and flows of your body speaking through the call. It's amazing, Erica. When you say I'm being real. When you say they are suffering more, what do you mean in terms of numbers?
Sure. So, I'm sure some of the people on here are going to be very data driven. So compared to men, women veterans are much more likely to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder, about 31% versus 20. We're much more significantly likely to have a diagnosis of depression, PTSD, anxiety, obesity, bipolars, you name it, suicides. So having women veterans with these mental diagnoses, they have different health problems. And with the amount of women that are increasingly serving, coming into the military and leaving, the VA, and honestly, normal hospitals aren't quite sure, and they can't keep up with the demand because women's health issues are different than men. And they're suffering from, STDs and UTIs, and, all their stuff just literally coming out of their body when you're talking about, female parts, the pelvic, the genitals, pin cushions, there's dysfunctions, reproductive health problems, and, there's little information out there in studies, but what we can, common sense will tell you is that, the military has always been one size fits all, and it's slowly changing. I mean, I would get the same dose as a huge muscle guy for shots. I would wear the same equipment, therefore the weight rested on my hips, versus, men have more back problems because it rests on their back. So because all of this weight is on our hips, it's causing a lot of, problems with women, with UTIs and bladder problems. So I will say that the unemployment and suicide rate, yeah, exactly, epidemically high. If you look at unemployment rates, we're at about 11% compared to 7% for normal women, and younger women face about 35% unemployment rates. They've generally got more family to take care of, a harder time transitioning. They're more likely to be divorced. They're more likely to be taking care of their parents and their kids, which relates to civilian, world as well. And even if they were in combat arms, again, men are seen as the warriors. And, when we're talking about buying land or buying houses or access to capital and entrepreneurship, I mean, we're 21% less likely to win government contracts. We're much less likely, about 4% of us get VC loans as women. We're much higher to experience homelessness and poverty. When you look at younger women veterans, I mean, they're at a higher risk. They're about 12 times the rate of non-veteran women for homelessness and depression and PTSD. So we're about 15% of the military, but, we account for about 95% of reported sex crimes. And from about 2005 to 2015, the amount of veterans using the VA healthcare center increased 46%. I mean, they just don't know how to deal with this, and they're trying. I think women's health in general, there's a lack of data, but in terms of women veterans, there's much less lack of data, and a lot of research needs to be done. But most of us women veterans can explain the why behind all of this. And, I always think that's the most important. If you can kind of figure out why women are suffering certain problems and why they have higher rates of suicide and depression, and then we can really start holistically looking at how we are going to fix those problems, which I could get to in a second.
Yeah, well, we could go on forever. We're going to run out of time here real quick in this podcast. It's the amazing thing is that every time we keep going down this path, the invisibleness of the female veterans gets exponentially higher. It's like it's buried under the dirt, under the rug. Just it's not even. It didn't happen. Just look at your numbers are overwhelming. Now that you've outlined the uniqueness of women over their male counterparts, can you tell me a little about your journey as a female veteran as it relates? You've talked about some of it as going through college and going through all that stuff. So has there anything that you have experienced during that time, because we've heard a little bit at the beginning, that you believe that was a saving grace, or was it a constitute of all the different things you went through that keeps you alive and going? Because I know that, we were at an event and I made a comment because every time you posed, your hands were clenched and you're in this perfect position. Even if there were other, everyone in the military still in their uniforms, you still have this perfect pose, and yet the others were a little bit relaxed. And you made a comment to me. Remember that?
Tell me the comment. I make lots of comments, Desiree.
You told me to comment about that. That's how you're supposed to pose, is that in the military you have to be proud and strong and just be there and be in the moment.
Of course, you have to have, we call it having presence, right? We just have to have presence.
Yeah. But you get to have that 20 years and the time you left and coming back and still have that integrity and the intensity. I could see it in your face. I could see it in your hands. I could see it all the way through your entire body. It was incredible. So I'm just saying that you keep that poise of being not invisible and making sure that through your amplification of your voice, your body, and your spirit, you are making sure that that veteran is not invisible, especially the female veteran.
Well, yeah. And I just want to jump back to numbers just very quickly. I mean, when you look at male to female veterans, men are about twice the rate to commit suicide as the male population, and females are at about 6 times the rate. And when you look at PTSD, women are 2 to 3 times higher over our male counterparts, and we're at about 10% homelessness versus 5% male. So the numbers are very real.
Okay. Yeah.
But we can get to the positive. We can get to what we're doing and
exactly.
We can get to, what works.
Number 5. Yeah, exactly. Since we got only a little bit left here, let's get to the fun stuff. Now that we're aware of all these issues, what really works and how can we get past, as you call it, the statistical cliff? What do veterans really need from their firsthand experience as a veteran and advocate?
Yeah, I mean, billions of dollars every year continue to flow to mental health professionals. We call them white coats, federal programs, research. You look at Congress and you look at Pentagon and you look at everybody trying to tackle this, and they still can't figure out why is this happening. They keep throwing money at it. And it's very simple. We are not holistically looking at our veterans. There's too much help out there. It's overwhelming. And nobody is really looking out for that whole picture of a veteran. If we do not, as you said, catch them within the first 3 years, and we are not pointing them in the right direction, and we're not being honest with them on, hey, the road is going to be bumpy. This is what it looks like. This is what the numbers say. It's going to kind of suck. And you know what? You're going to get a job, and half of you are going to quit by your first year. And by year 2, you're talking 3/4 you're going to quit. And that's the number one stressor. You don't have a job. That's a problem. Not only not having a job is a problem, but then you get into community and relationships. So what can we do that will work? And I always go back to peer-to-peer. I've been at this advocacy thing a while now, probably a decade. Over my business travels, I always sat next to veterans. I don't know what the deal was, but the universe kept pointing me to this, saying, wake up, pay attention, and get involved. And these guys would just pour their stories out. And I'm like, why do these strangers tell me all of this stuff they've never told their wives and their families? And I quickly realized that having that once they got past my exterior and they're like, oh my gosh, you were in the fight, you're in the military, they trusted me. And it was also something really interesting. I thought maybe because I'm a woman and it's a little less threatening that they could feel vulnerable. There was something there.
Right.
And so over the years, I was just like, oh my gosh, why? And so then I started digging into numbers. I slowly started getting involved in groups. And then I recognized that entrepreneurship was a great way to kind of point veterans in the right direction, since 40% of us are going into business versus like 10% in the Vietnam era. And through that, I've met thousands of veterans and heard thousands of stories. And, I've been inspired, and I hopefully, myself and the people that I've worked with have had a hand in being straight talk with them and say, this is great. Let's talk war stories where you're at, but where do you need to be and how do we get you there? So we've sort of narrowed it down to 4 areas. They need connection and real relationships in a community that they're unfamiliar with. They need shelter. They need rent, house, something. They need some kind of career development, and they need to take care of their mental, physical, and spiritual health. And that's the triage piece. So, and then what 3 areas can we address to cover those? And that's, again, veterans are not taught all this stuff while they serve, but when they get out, they should be taught how to, your personal piece, how to manage your money, how to get a home? You know, what kind of benefits are out there? And, you know, professionally, are you looking at education or job training or entrepreneurship? And then the rehabilitation piece. How can we look at the suicide, PTSD, depression? What alternatives are out there besides white coats? What's in the local area that can really, you know, they can touch and feel, and we can vet them to make sure that they're not just trying to make a buck off our veterans, but they're doing good things. And then once we educate them and get them involved, we're way more likely to participate in our communities and volunteer. We make our communities safer. We're much more likely to vote. We're much more likely to run and win for office. We're much more likely to do well, you know, 2 times more likely to succeed in business as non-veteran-owned business owners. We're much more likely to increase ROI within corporations. So we are national treasures, but we have to get them through that 3 years. And if we can, and we can speak to the commercial world and the veteran community on how to understand each other and each other's value, and again, what the road looks like and what it can look like, the success stories on the back end, then we are really addressing it. But if we keep throwing billions at the wrong things and we keep opening up, you know, these veteran community organizations that tackle one little piece of this and not the holistic picture, we're going to continue.
Silo. Yep. Well, you know, you talk about some incredible words, so thank you for your solutions. It really is. You talk about straight talk, which I absolutely love. You talk about the military speak. You talk about the national treasure. And you also talk about the fact that is that, you know, the team player versus the I in corporate America. So with those key points, you know, it's so powerful to have knowing exactly where you stand in the straight talk, understanding the rules, understanding the feelings, the intensity, the powerful message that's being sent, and the military speak of getting to triggering to get them to relax. You know, it's like having, you know, they always say that pets are an incredible journey to help. You know, you can't get all the drugs in the world, can't get to someone, but here a dog comes up and licks someone or does something, and it's a difference of life or death just because that one moment, because they can relax them and calm them down. And I believe that relates to the military speak. You really can get to the core, get what is going to get them to engage, get that person to understand, and maybe it takes a couple different ways of saying it, but that military speak is so powerful. And as you said, the national treasure, when we spoke before about how the number one thing is that they go into construction, how you can get them to go through that 3-year cycle to really turn up that dial to be productive and get back to them, and then they can be the best, as you say, the national treasure. This is incredible. So one of the things that I would like to also address is that, you know, I know from the military statistics, we're talking about they're not educated before they get out as far as the programs and platforms they have that they have resources for when the veterans get out, is that 80% of all the veterans who have own a home when they get out, but only 13% of them use their VA loans. How can we address that? Something so very valuable, as you talked about, it's one of the foremost key components is having a roof over the head. What's that look like and get into home ownership? So what do you think would be so valuable to help there?
I think we just need to educate realtors. We need to educate lenders because the veteran starts going down the path of trying to potentially get a VA loan, and the bureaucracy, I know it sounds easy, but it's not. And remember, veterans are taught how to write a check and keep the home front, you know, sort of just surviving while you're deployed. They're not really taught to invest because every month you have money coming out of your check going to investment. You don't have to think about it. So when you get out, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have to learn how to plan for retirement, to invest, to buy a home, and nothing is ever easy. All the benefits that veterans have, you know, they look great on paper, but anybody who's been through the process, I've been through the process, it takes a lot of time. You know, recently the VA just said that there's no cap anymore on VA loans, and I guarantee you my veteran community doesn't know that, because before you can only get a VA loan up to a certain point, and then you had to pay the difference of your deposit and some other things. So, you know, it's just educating people about these are resources that veterans have available to them, and here's how you can kind of help them through this process, because do not assume that the veteran understands, because when they get out, it's very much how to prepare for corporate America instead of a ton of other things that they could be well suited for.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we got to educate everyone before they get out of the service, especially the females, because they're the ones who are making 91% of all the buying purchases just as a whole, not as a veteran themselves. You have the women outliving the men. You also have the women that have, I believe that would really help if they had a core sanctuary. You talked about the mental health issues that they're being faced with the female veterans. If you gave them a place to do their thing, to decorate, to be involved, to be creative, because as you talk about the camaraderie in the service and being able to help each other and be protective, you know, you get into an environment that you have your home and you protect your surroundings. I think it'll really be a positive thing. So educating the veterans before they get out of service, that they have the right, they have the opportunities, they have the resources for the loans, access to capital, not only for home, but for a business. And then also, what are those parameters to get done? And you touched on something very interesting that really resonated when you just talked, is that when you're in the service, everything's automatically paid for you or withdrawn for you, and it's automated, and they're out there serving the country and doing the gig. So when they get back, they now have options. What do they do? How they do? Where they invest, and how they, things. So they've been not practicing that skill set, maybe not exposed to that skill set. So it's a double whammy because they're looked at like, hey, you've been in the military, you've been getting a check. What do you mean you don't understand how to get that right? Very interesting.
Absolutely. And they're accountable. So in the military, if you're a young soldier and you're not paying your bills and the bill collector calls the commander, that soldier is going to suffer and that soldier is going to feel it. So, you get on the outside, there's no one holding their hand. They got to figure this stuff out, just basic banking, basic loan stuff. So a lot of them go to those shanty, day loan places and get charged crazy interest rates or credit cards. And then they go into debt, and then that just spirals out of control in terms of depression. And, then the onslaught of the statistical cliff comes on. So we definitely need to do a better job. And we also have to, again, educate the commercial market that when you're dealing with a veteran, here's some tools and that you can use to make sure that you're setting that person up for success.
Wow. It's exactly the core of putting this together, to making sure that, they have so much transitioning from the veteran capacity to the civilian, how their workflow, their expectations of the civilian life, the integration back to family. If they're going back home, 50% of them not going back to where they entered from or going back to family. It's almost like a boot camp to exit, like the boot camp going in.
They have
really touches.
The military has things like soldiers for life, and each branch has their own, and some are better than others. And I stay pretty abreast as to what are they teaching you. And, again, we need to be doing a much better job there, because generally these programs are run by people who don't speak the language, have never had to live both worlds, and the veterans they're still serving. A lot of them are listening to people that, it's not peer-to-peer. They don't trust them. These people don't know where they've come from. So, you really have to think about who you put in front and what their experiences are, and really develop a program that is meaningful and honest. We're not being honest with what the road is going to look like, and they think something is wrong with them because they cannot connect and they get isolated. We have to tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we have to prepare them like we would for any battle. That is what this is. This is a war to save our veterans, and we are not winning.
With that note, how do we help? How can we help your mission on the female veterans and veterans as a whole to be not invisible and everyone do their part? Give us three examples. Go ahead.
Well, first thing is any veteran that's listening to this, male or female, just men, be aware that women have some different kinds of issues. And when you invite them to veteran events, they may not want to be hanging out at the frat party scene, with cheerleaders and pom-poms everywhere. They wonder why they can't get women veterans to show up to a lot of, veteran events. And, it's because women veterans generally want to hang out with women veterans. So think about that. And women veterans need to tell their story. They had confidence once. They had that presence, and I see them get out and their posture's terrible, and they're lacking confidence. And I'm like, where is that woman that led 120 guys? Where is she? What did you do? Bring that to your normal world and tell your story. Get past the cultural divide of, if they don't tell their stories and they don't make themselves interesting, there's 10 people behind them that are going to sound interesting to get that job or get that customer. So, that's right. Something they have to overcome pretty quick. And that's where other veterans talking to veterans, I'm like, hey, let's talk about what that means in normal speak. And there has to be more community-centered approaches. And that's why, we've started the concept of Zulu time, where it is a community-based approach, not your grandfather's VFW dark walls. It's a tech center. It's community resources. It's, a comfortable place that veterans can talk to veterans in their community. And you've got trained veteran counselors there and assistants with, leaders in that community that you can literally walk to, because people are tired of seeing all the resources when they go online in DC. That's not helping anybody. And then really it's just things like this, giving veterans the platform to discuss, the reality of, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I appreciate that. And, it's not easy for me to tell my story. And like I said, it never has been. This isn't about me. It's about my brothers and it's about my sisters. And I really appreciate people just educating people about, what this transition looks like.
There's so much more we could go on and on and on. And this is incredible, Erica. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I mean, we ran a 6-part series on Erica's biography from being in the service, that she took the time to write in the detail that you just heard. And with all the pictures and running and impact of where, when, how, what it felt like to be there and to just integrate with society inside, outside, and the effects that had happened on a personal level as her group, and then also of transitions. And so to be able to have that journey these last couple of years and to see as if the continuation of it, of always having to see more and see more and see that the lines are blurring and they're not being defined of growth going forward and going the opposite direction of good. All of us who's listened to this call has got to make sure that we share this information, get it out to the masses, because the most important thing, as Erica said, is that we got to get this information out so everyone can see and hear. Yes, we have the veterans for 22. You saw on social media have a really big impact, as far as getting and doing the push-ups and this and this and this. But the idea is that that's number one. You get some awareness. But number two is, what can you do, each of us individually, every day, to understand those consequences, what we can do to help out and reach out. So with that being said, Erica, I would love to have you give where they can get a hold of you, what platform, based on what they would like to resonate to help out with the cause here for helping to get female veterans and all veterans to not be invisible, but especially female veterans from being invisible.
Sure, I can give you, I'm a woman of many hats and many titles, not, the good and bad. So, but I can give you my 2020 vet email address. I think that's the easiest. So that would be E as in Echo, and then Courtney, COURTNEY at 2020vet.com. So that's eCourtney at 2020vet.com.
Excellent. So that's one. And then we also have the Zulu time, which will be hearing a lot more. That's at Zulu, just like it sounds, ZULU time, TIME, now, NOW.com. That's up. You can see what the triage looks like, what the whole overview of that whole impact. And if you'd like to be part of it, please, there's various different ways you can get a hold of us through that platform. I can get that information out there. So if you want to be part of that growth and impact and whatever service you would like to offer, whether it's from, transitional information, whether you want to be a participant, whether you want to provide access and support services, we want to hear about that so we can form and grow it, because as it continues day to day, there's just so much that has to be out there, give it, because every transition and impact is there's so much that we need to get out, because obviously, as Erica, we heard that the numbers are dismal. They're going worse, not better. We've got to change that around. It's going to take all of us to get on board. One act of kindness just goes so far. And one of the things that I heard from Colin Powell, I remember many years ago, he says, go up into someone and say, thank you for service. But most importantly, don't just thank, buy. Walk up there and just pay for the coffee. Go up there and do something that's really changing someone and give that, synergy. We're so siloed. We don't talk to each other. We're so into ourselves. Go out there and just acknowledge, give someone a hug, be in the moment. I think it's so far. And if you think about it from a female veterans, right, from not being invisible, going up and hugging a female veteran, how would you take that, Erica? If someone who didn't know you and heard your story and walked up and gave you a hug, put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'd probably be a little uncomfortable. But I would appreciate it. I mean, anytime says a nice gesture. I mean, we all are kind of like, okay, thank you so much. But I think what it really boils down to is go past the thank you for your service and a hug. It's like really be patient and get to know that veteran, and veteran really be patient and get to know that non-veteran, because you're going to have more in common than you think. And in this divisive time that we live in, it's so important for us to just have meaningful conversations and, go deeper as you do, Desiree, with your guests, and try to figure out, again, the synergies and how we can work to make this planet a better place together.
I think that's a perfect way to end our podcast. So for Know the Rules, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, Erica, for all that you do and continue to do for your mission and our friendship and our business relationship and the growth that we're going to have. I want to thank you again for being on our guest on the podcast for Know the Rules of the Game for the female veteran. Again, for NAWRB, if you'd like to get involved, it's NAWRB.com. You can reach us, info@NAWRB.com. And we're really about the quality of life of the entrepreneur and the equality of information that we can give and the resources out. So taking a deep dive, again, this is Desiree Patno. I'm your host of Know the Rules of the Game. So thank you all, and stay tuned for next week at 8 a.m. Again, every Wednesday at 8 a.m. we have Know the Rules of the Game. So thank you all and have a beautiful day. And thank you again, Erica.